everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. This is a critically important program we have organized tonight, and we couldn't ask for a better authority in our dear friend Frank Palmasani, who has returned to guide us through what I think of as a foreign language. Because of Frank's kindness, this will be available on both our Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel, and also if you go to the Glenbard Parent Series website as a past event and find Frank's page, you'll be able to see this recording and you'll be able to see the handouts. And so we encourage you to share everything Glenbard Parent Series. We always say everyone is welcome here. People who live across the street, relatives who live across the country. If you go to that Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel, you'll see many of the past events that we've already explored this year to date. If you are a social media person, we encourage you to share, like. We work hard to let everybody know that this is for everyone. Thank you for the gift of your time tonight. Thank you to the sponsors who make this all possible. We couldn't do it with all of you. Very briefly, I want to tell you about some of the upcoming events as part of the Glenbard Parent Series. There is a special event next Wednesday. Many of you are familiar with Lisa D'Amour. She has a new book called The Emotional Lives of Teens. We're calling it a playbook to thrive in trying times. She'll be with us next Wednesday, the 15th at noon and 7 p.m. Please, please, please don't miss it. There are so many takeaways that she shares that really go along with tonight's program as well for those students that are in this high stakes time that we're experiencing now. Then the week following, we're going to be talking about self-care, compassion. Shelley Tigliski will be talking about the path to loving ourselves, self-compassion, and self-care for turbulent times. In the same similar vein, the following week, we'll be talking about a topic with the promise of a pencil. It's our community read, the story of how an ordinary person can create extraordinary change. And in similarly to tonight, there's a program in Spanish. For those of you that have friends who might benefit from that, please do share. Thursday, September 21st, in Spanish, there is a program on everything about applying for college in Spanish. And then there's a program in Gujarati that's coming up on the 28th, and that pretty much finishes the month of September. So I thank you for allowing us to share that. You'll want to circle your calendar. I want to introduce tonight's very special guest. Frank Palmasani, a dear friend, is a college counselor at Providence Catholic High School. He is an author and true expert on how families can finance college without amassing debt. He has been dedicated to this topic for more than 30 years and is well known in the field. He's the author of Right College, Right Price. His ideas have already helped countless families navigate college affordability, making it possible for students to graduate without excessive debt. This might be a good time for you to tweet or make a phone call. Anyone who's in the throes of this will want to listen in. And without further ado, we will start the show.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Frank Palmasani, and I've been a professional educator for the last 48 years. I spent time as a college admissions director and a high school counselor. And over those last 40 years or so, I've had the privilege of introducing the idea of conquering college costs to many high school parents and high school counselors working with parents as their children were about to go to college. I'm going to introduce a couple of ideas to you in this short introduction before we get into the real content of the program. So as you can see from the slide, let's talk a little bit about our goals. What we want to do is learn every possible way that a college sticker price can be reduced. We want to talk about how one goes about finding affordable college options. We're going to talk about paying for college without excessive debt. And then obviously you're going to want to learn what to do and when to do it. We're going to start by this video, these short videos that you're going to have an opportunity to see, a PowerPoint presentation to go along with the video, and handouts that will allow you to follow along and keep those as a permanent resource. I want to start by talking about prices. So when we talk about college prices, it's important that we understand definitions. And as you can see from the slide, you're going to notice a descending line. That's really one of the goals of the presentation, to try to teach you how you actually reduce your price over time, starting with sticker price, knowing that that's the price that the college lists as a charge, which you can typically find on any college website. But then you're also going to look at an estimate of what you would actually pay. This is called the net price, and you find these by using the college's net price calculators, software programs that every college has on their website. We eventually get to the out-of-pocket cost, which is the price that you would pay once you receive your award letter, which I will get into in the execution phase. And later in this seminar, you're going to see how you're going to get to a fourth column and a fourth price that we will introduce as we also get into the execution phase. So the first seminar I'd like you to look at would be that short seminar on the idea of every possible way that you can reduce college sticker price. Welcome to Conquering College Costs. I'm Frank Palmasani. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to watch the introduction. This particular seminar is going to focus on every possible way that you can get your college sticker price reduced. So as you are viewing the seminar, what I would like you to think about is knowing your son or daughter. What are the areas that you should be concentrating on? If you file a document, now I'm going to talk about this document later. The document is called FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Regardless of your income, regardless of your assets, your son or daughter is going to be able to borrow money. They're not going to be able to borrow an unlimited amount of money. But in freshman year, it's $5,500 as the maximum, $6,500 in sophomore year, $7,500 in each of junior and senior years, and a few more dollars if indeed they go on beyond 4 years. Ultimately, this is a student loan, a direct loan, that is written in the student's name. The parent has no legal responsibility on the repayment of the loan. And now we have a new series of repayment options once the student has graduated. And so it is an attractive student loan, and it might be a method that you would want to use to reduce your sticker price. So you'll file the document and automatically you will become eligible for this particular loan. The other element of eligibility is typically the opportunity to work on a college campus if you file the document. Now, it is true that there are some students that are eligible for a program that we call federal work study. But many other students who aren't eligible for that program can still find employment. And so it's not perfect in a sense that we can't exactly determine how much a student is going to be able to earn because different jobs might pay different amounts. But in our calculation, we might want to estimate that a student can earn approximately $3,500, in some cases more, but approximately $3,500 as a way to reduce that annual sticker price. All right, now once you file the document, there's going to be an assessment. And this particular assessment is then going to determine whether or not you're eligible for any one of three need-based grant programs. The first and most common need-based grant program is a program called the Pell Grant. Now, we are going through a new process this year called FAFSA simplification. And one of the elements that they've changed in FAFSA simplification is Pell Grant eligibility. So even though you still have to file this document, which we call FAFSA, you're going to be able to know your Pell Grant eligibility based on an income table that will be produced. It's going to be produced as we get into the fall. Now, it's possible, as you're watching this video, that you've already seen these new Pell Grant tables. They are basically going to demonstrate income levels, size of families, and then determine if Pell Grant eligibility is available and the amount. So in advance of the process, you will know whether you're eligible for a Pell Grant or you're not eligible. I would say this to you. If you learn that you're beyond Pell Grant eligibility, don't assume that you're not eligible for any other need-based assistance, because there's two more. One would be if you're a student, if your son or daughter is a student in the state of Illinois, if you reside in the state of Illinois, and attend a school in the state of Illinois, any state-supported institution or private institution in Illinois, then you will be assessed as to whether or not you're eligible for a state grant program that is called MAP. Now again, this eligibility will be tied into the calculation that's going to be done when you file that document we call FAFSA. The terminology that's used in that calculation is your student aid index. The Illinois Student Assistance Commission will assess that index and then determine if you're eligible for this MAP grant. But it's difficult to be eligible for a federal grant, and sometimes difficult to be eligible for a state grant based on their income thresholds. However, understand that every college also has a pool of resources that would be need-based, that would be institutional money, money from the college itself. And so it is advisable for you to file that document to determine whether or not the college is willing to provide need-based money to your son or daughter to allow you to reduce sticker price. All right, now let's get into where a number of students, a number of families have sticker price reduced. This goes beyond the scope of the idea of need and now starts moving over to the concept of merit. And this is the most prominent one. The student applies, the student gets accepted, and the institution, the college, is providing merit-based money based on how that student performed in high school, what the student's GPA was. In some cases, what that student's test score, ACT or SAT test score, was determined to be. The institution might look at that information and then immediately, after a student is accepted, provide resources. One of the things that often happens is we have students that are participating in high school athletics. And we know there are opportunities out there for those students who want to continue to participate to perhaps have sticker prices be reduced by indeed playing their sport on the college level. Now, what we hear often about is that student that gets a free ride. Maybe they're playing one of the major sports. But yet there are many other young men and women who have played in high school, want to continue to play on the college level, and might get sticker prices reduced. So the key there is to make sure that that interest that the student have is made known to college coaches, made known to the admissions people that they're going to encounter. So those potential opportunities might be obtained and can reduce sticker price. Now, the third bullet that you see on the screen is really important because obviously your son or daughter may have gifts that are beyond the classroom and beyond athletics. It might be in art. It might be in music. It might be in theater. Maybe they're a leader. Maybe they're a volunteer. Maybe they're interested in an academic area that is so important to the institution, to the university, that that college might be willing to offer resources. This is a big umbrella. We call these talent scholarships. Now, you're going to notice on this slide there are two words that are connected with this concept. Those words are resume and relationship. Every time you have a conversation with a college admissions person, maybe when that person comes to visit your high school, maybe when you're out visiting college campuses, perhaps at a college fair, wouldn't it be advisable to have the student create a professional-looking resume, hand that to the admissions person, highlighting these gifts and talents, these strengths, because it's that admissions person that might be able to be a helper, a conduit, someone who can advise the student, advise you as a family as to what potential talent scholarships might be available at their institution, matching what that student's gifts and talents are. One of the things that often happens is a student applies to admissions, through admission at a particular institution. The institution responds in acceptance letter and some scholarship money. But then the family stops. And what I would encourage you to do is to ask the next question. And the next question is, are there other competitive scholarships? In other words, based on that academic record, the student might be informed that they're getting a certain amount of scholarship money, but then a university might ask them or suggest if they come to the campus and compete, there might be other dollars available. Ask about those competitive scholarships. We also know that there are some universities that offer scholarships for siblings, maybe if there's some legacy involved where the parent attended or a grandparent attended. We also know that if a student is making a commitment to the military, that there are opportunities there for scholarship resources. I'd like to spend some time on this last bullet, independent scholarships. We know there are hundreds, thousands of independent scholarship possibilities available. Now, a student can go into a national database, perhaps something like FastWeb, and have those scholarship opportunities get matched against that student's profile. Unfortunately, when a student does that, it might appear to be information overload. Indeed, there are so many possibilities. Where do I get started? Here's what I'd like you to do as a parent. I would like you to help your son or daughter by organizing these independent scholarships into 3 categories. Are they regional? Are they local? Are they national? Local scholarships. Those particular entities that are providing scholarship opportunities from the local area, directly from your high school. Every high school counseling office will typically list those organizations that every year provide money to students from that high school. Check on those first. Make sure your son or daughter doesn't miss out any of those opportunities because they're going to be competing only with their classmates. And then the regional scholarships, those that might be available in your geographic area, in your community. What you might want to do is not only check the website of your high school, but all of the high schools in your region. Now, it's a bigger pool than these local scholarships, but still somewhat confined. What you don't want to do is have your son or daughter spend a lot of time and energy if they see that the scholarship is national, where they could be competing with everyone else in the country. Or the last concept here that I would like to talk about as it relates to sticker price reduction is very particular in nature, and that is pursuing institutions outside of your state. We know that when we talk about state schools, and I'm not talking about private institutions, I'm talking about state-supported institutions, we know that state schools charge a different amount, have a different sticker price for tuition if you're a resident of that state versus if you are not a resident of that state. But there are a number of states that will demonstrate to you how you can theoretically become a resident to allow your sticker price reduced. So if you're going to have your son or daughter look at institutions that are outside of your state, make sure you ask those schools, do you have a pathway to residency program? All right, now what I'd like you to do is to go over to our next video on the planning phase. Welcome to Conquering College Cost. I'm Frank Palmasani, and this particular video is about the planning phase. Now, when I talk about planning, I'm not talking about starting at when the student is 5 years old and putting resources away for planning. That's certainly an important element of this process. But I'm talking about you as a high school parent, a parent of a high school student, and you're trying to plan for this obvious inevitability of college costs. Now, I'd like you to focus on this particular diagram, this graph, because I think it's a beautiful explanation, an illustration of what we're trying to accomplish here. You're going to notice there are three elements of planning that are integrated. You know, if I was talking to a group of students, not a group of parents, but students, and I talked about the importance of academic planning for college, I may say things like this. You're going to want to look at schools that have the major or program that you're most interested in. You're going to want to make sure that those programs are of the quality that you are most interested in. Students would understand that. They think and appreciate and understand the importance of that idea. If I talk to students about the significance and importance of going to colleges, considering colleges where you're going to be comfortable, where the atmosphere is right for you, where the location is right, students would get that. They would understand that idea. This is where it gets a little muddy. When we move to the next segment, you're going to want to look at schools that don't put you into excessive debt positions, that are not going to be harmful to you financially or your family financially long term. Do they really have an understanding, an appreciation? Do they have the know-how to understand this financial fit concept? I would suggest that they don't. And that's why for the last 40 years or so, I have delivered programs to parents, because I believe that parents have to take absolute and total control of this particular element in this process. What I'm hoping to show you in this planning phase, how you're going to be able to do that efficiently and effectively, and how you're going to help your son or daughter integrate those ideas so that you're working together on this end goal of finding the best college, the best university, from an academic point of view, from a feel point of view, and from a financial point of view. Let's start this discussion by going back to our theory of columns. Do you remember early on in the introduction, I suggested that you're going to create a 4-column chart. I think we talked about a 3-column chart. We're going to move to a 4-column chart. Well, one of the things we want to initially do is focus on column 2 and column 3, getting away from thinking about the sticker price and now looking at this estimate that we call net price and then eventual out-of-pocket cost. And I'm also going to suggest that in the process of applying to universities, as we go through and explain to you how we get there, that you're going to want to help your son or daughter by suggesting to them that they apply to financial reaches, schools that might appear to be beyond what you can afford. But we also are going to encourage you to make sure that they apply to financial fits, schools that do hit that affordability threshold, and maybe even financial backups. Now, let's go in and explain what those mean and the steps. It seems to me that the first step of this process is that you are going to want to get some help in relationship to assessing and determining what it is you can actually afford on an individual basis, on a yearly basis. And perhaps the first thing you ought to do is think about what's reasonable borrowing and what is excessive borrowing. Ultimately, let me give you some data, and that might help you. Think of $60,000, because if we take the average amount of student debt as it relates to undergraduate education and add in the average amount of parent debt, we get over a 4 or 5 year continuum about a $60,000 debt commitment. That's an average. Is that reasonable to your family? Perhaps not. And so ultimately, assess that. What is reasonable before you even go on to that second element of assessing affordability? How do I look at affordability in a systematic way? I can just take a number out of the blue. I can just go ahead and suggest this is what we believe we can afford to pay on a yearly basis. Or you can do it systematically by looking at cash flow. What am I paying for now that I won't be paying for my son or daughter when they're away at college? By looking at tax credits, am I eligible to have some of my federal taxes reduced because we have college costs? By looking at available savings, and by going back and assessing this idea of reasonable borrowing. Now, you're going to notice on the slide that we're suggesting see handouts. We have handouts in all of our segmented presentations that you can use as a backup, as a permanent resource. So at the bottom of every video, you can always see where these links are, where you can obtain those handouts to help you. And this is one of the handouts. All right, the next particular component I'm going to get into in great depth, and that is looking at the pricing options. It's important to understand, like every other commodity out there, colleges have pricing categories. And if you understand these categories, that will help you assess and determine where you can find those institutions that are more likely to reduce that sticker price. And then finally, recognizing the importance of using these planning tools, these software programs that earlier we called net price calculators that are available on every college website, so that you can create your column 2. All right, I talked about pricing categories. Now it's important to understand what these categories are. And as I said earlier, what is their philosophy as it relates to sticker price reduction? So let's start with state-supported institutions. And we have a category that we call flagship, the premier state-supported institution in a given state. Most people know who these are. These are the most prestigious. These are the largest institutions. I'm doing this presentation from Illinois. We know in Illinois we have one of these, the University of Illinois at Urbana. However, maybe if you lived in Iowa or were looking at schools in Iowa, you would say University of Iowa, we know, is the flagship. You might include Iowa State. But if you were going in Indiana, they would certainly say both IU and Purdue. And in Michigan, they would certainly say both Michigan and Michigan State. Point is, most states are going to have one of these flagships. Some states might have 2, maybe 3 state-supported institutions they consider to be flagships. Now, one of the things we know about flagships as it relates to sticker price reduction on the merit side is that typically this is a category that is not as likely to provide these opportunities at some of the other categories of institutions. Some of these state-supported institutions are more difficult to obtain these resources than others. My experience has been that institutions south and some institutions west that are considered flagships are more inclined to provide merit-based sticker price reduction than others. Others perhaps in the East Coast, certainly some others in the Midwest. Then we look at the other state schools that we call non-flagship state schools. So these are state-supported institutions that aren't the flagship, but every state typically has multiple state-supported institutions. Again, in Illinois, we know who these are: Northern, Eastern, Southern, Western, UIC, Illinois State. These are our non-flagship state-supported institutions. Now, what we find out in these institutions is typically for students in the state, they will have lower sticker prices. Oftentimes there are merit dollars available, and even the non-flagship state schools out of state, as I indicated in an earlier video, many of them are demonstrating how a student might be able to get in-state fees charged to them even if they live out of state. And in some cases, even provide other merit scholarship options. So this can be a category of schools that might be financially attractive to many families. Now let's move on to the privates. And what I'm going to do is segue away from the highly selectives for a minute and talk about two other categories of private institutions. We call these the mid-sized privates and the traditional privates. Now the mid-sized privates are a generally small group of institutions with some very recognizable names. Loyola, DePaul, Marquette, St. Louis University, Bradley, the University of Tampa, Creighton, the University of Dayton, and there are a number of others. These institutions will always provide merit-based dollars when a student is accepted, and they are typically eager to work with families on those particular topics. And also, you'll find this in the traditional privates. Usually, families think of the traditional privates as the smaller colleges. Now, one of the things you find that this particular category does better than typically the others, and that is really get into researching and examining the gifts, the strengths, and the talents of your son or daughter. Because if they can stack awards together, provide multiple ways to reduce sticker price, because perhaps the student is involved in art and there might be that opportunity. Perhaps the student is involved in theater or as an athlete or as a leader. Many of these traditional privates, smaller colleges, will look to research those opportunities with your son or daughter to get that sticker price reduced even more. Let me go back now and talk a little bit about the highly selectives. Of course, we know who they are. These are the Ivies. This is University of Chicago, Northwestern, Notre Dame. This particular category of schools are less interested in the merit side. Many of these institutions don't provide merit-based money, or maybe a limited amount of merit-based money. But yet they're very strong on the need-based side of the process. If you recall from that earlier seminar, we differentiated need-based opportunities with merit-based opportunities. But I will say to you that the way they assess and determine that need is quite different. So in addition to this one document that we heard about before called FAFSA, they'll ask for other information. Usually that other information is found in a program called the CSS profile. I'll talk about that later. They'll gather that information and then make an assessment as to whether or not they can provide resources on the need-based level. I will say to you, it's difficult for students to get admitted to these highly selective institutions. But if your son or daughter has the academic muster to consider them, certainly go to those websites, look at those net price calculators, find out if indeed those institutions might be affordable, even though you're going to see those very, very high sticker prices. Now you're going to notice from the particular slide, there are two other backup opportunities. I look at the backups as, well, what if you were to examine institutions, example institutions in each of these categories, and you were looking to match what that net price was. Now remember, we're not looking at sticker price, we're looking at net price from the net price calculators, and you're trying to find these financial fits, but you're not able to. It appears as if every example you look at is beyond your affordability. Now, you might want to examine some backups. Do you know that a major aspect of the cost of an institution has nothing to do with the classroom experience, and it has nothing to do with the degree at the end of the experience? Of course, it's living on a college campus. Living on a college campus today is going to cost a family maybe $10, $12, $14, $15,000 a year. And so, is it prudent for you to think about the four-year institutions in your community where your son or daughter could live at home and potentially save that cost and still get the quality education that you're aiming for? Let me share with you something personally. I have 4 children. 2 of my children lived on a college campus. 2 lived at home. They're all working adults today, and I will tell you something about the 2 that lived at home. They're still fine. Nothing happened to them because they couldn't indeed live on a college campus. Now, I don't want to in any way undersell the value of that experience. All I'm suggesting is you have to bring some financial prudence to all of this. And then, of course, there's that other backup option, and that's the going to the community college. Now, there are many, many reasons why families might choose community colleges that are academic in nature, or even on the field side. But strictly from a financial perspective, we know obviously that that can be a wise financial move. Taking advantage of those very low costs over 2 years allows a student to transfer to the institution of choice, and maybe over a 4-year period of time, find that it can be very, very affordable. And so ultimately, the point of this method is to understand that there are pricing categories. And the more you know about these pricing categories, and the more that you can convince your son or daughter to at least examine institutions in each of these categories, apply to schools in these categories in this process, will allow you eventually to make this prudent choice in the end, matching your affordability with those best schools. Now, let's take a look at an example. In a handout, you're going to see an example family. And what we did in this scenario is we create a 4-column chart. And this is something that I'm going to encourage every family to do. You start with sticker price. You take example colleges in each of the categories and you look up their sticker price. Then you go to their net price calculator and you indeed look at that estimated cost to you, which we call the net price. Now we're going to go into the execution phase, which is going to be our next video. And as you assess and determine from this list, here are the schools the student is going to actually apply to. Now we're going to eventually get into column 3, your out-of-pocket cost. And I'm going to also introduce to you another idea, and that idea is column 4. Because in this new methodology, FAFSA simplification, it's going to be even more important for your son or daughter to apply to a number of different institutions and for you to go through what we call the appeal process. Because the only way that institution, those universities are going to learn more about you financially to allow you to get that lower sticker price as possible, that lower out-of-pocket cost as possible, you may very well have to engage in a column 4, which we call the appeal process. Bottom line is we're going to encourage them to apply to financial reaches, apply to financial fits, and apply to financial backups. That terminology is called FAFSA simplification. You're going to notice in the first bullet on this slide, it says complete the FAFSA after October 1, and then I have /December. The reason why we indicate /December is this is the first year of FAFSA simplification. So for those families whose students are high school seniors today, that document is not going to be ready until December of 2023 for the 2024-25 academic year. However, going forward, we anticipate that we'll revert back to when it's always been available in the past, and that is during the month of October. So the idea is that we're going to enter the execution phase. That execution phase cannot be entered until we're in senior year. You've done good planning. You have an idea of where your son or daughter is going to apply. They may not have applied to all the schools yet. They may be still working on the schools they're going to apply to. But you've done your planning. You're cognizant of this concept of financial fit. But you have to execute all of this so that it actually happens. So you're going to file the document. You're going to file the document based on a tax return that is already completed, and you're going to file the document based on your savings and investments on the day that you actually file. What are those asset values on that particular day? Now, how is that document going to be viewed? What are the drivers that are going to eventually get the end result? The end result, which is called your student aid index. There are 4 drivers. The first driver is that adjusted gross income. The bottom line, the front page of the tax return. That's the data that they're going to use to drive element number 1, the biggest driver of this SAI index number. Now, one of the things they're going to do is they're going to take out certain elements of that income. They'll take out federal taxes, they'll take out state taxes, they'll take out FICA, Social Security contributions, and they're also going to take out expenses. But they're not going to ask you about your personal expenses. They create an expense allowance. Now, the good news for people who have filed FAFSA in the past is they've increased that expense allowance. And so ultimately in FAFSA simplification, they are actually reducing the impact of parent income in the actual equation. They've also taken out a number of variables in the category of untaxed income. So primarily, they're looking at the bottom line of the front page of the tax return. The second element that's going to be used as a driver in this calculation is the student income. But there's a lot of flexibility here. I never think that a student income, a dependent student income, should impact this calculation because there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of what a student can earn before an income is actually taken from that amount. In the past, it was about $6,600, and then 50% of earnings beyond that would be added to the calculation. That figure is even going up now with FAFSA simplification. The third category that is going to impact this student aid index is the parents' savings and investments. But the first thing you need to know when you go to this line item on the document is there are certain categories of savings and investments that should not be recorded. Those particular categories are the equity of one's home and the value of any retirement plans you own. No matter how that retirement plan is titled, is it a program at work, a 401k, a 403b? Is it an independent SEP, an IRA, a Roth? Is it tax-deferred annuity? Is cash value of life insurance? All of these components are assets that you can own, have potentially owned, but should not be recorded on the document at all. Now, what they're going to do with those savings and investments is that is going to impact the dollars that are used in the calculation of SAI, beyond those that you don't record. So, planning. Can planning be an element here of what you should do with your savings and investments? You might want to consider that. That is going to be a higher element than in the past. As they moved to FAFSA simplification, what they did was lower the expectation from income and increase the expectation from savings and investments. But what you do with your savings and investments is totally up to you prior to the day that you file the document. There are categories that have to be included and categories that should not be included. And then, of course, there's the category of the student savings and investments. And that also will be judged pretty harshly as it relates to increasing this student aid index. About 30% of that savings and investment listed under the Social Security number of the student is going to be a dollar amount added to this SAI. Now, there's always been some confusion about 529 college savings programs. 529 college savings programs, no matter how they are listed, how they are titled rather, they should be recorded as a parent asset and not a student asset. So the function, the question that always gets asked is, does it make sense to indeed reorganize savings and investments in advance of filing the document? What I would suggest to you is use your software programs. You go ahead and use net price calculators. Understand that they're planning tools. And if you feel like you need to reshuffle your deck, so to speak, to assess and determine whether that will have a bearing on the eventual net price, go ahead and do that. And then at some point, if you need to talk to your advisor, your financial advisor, your planner, someone who has expertise in this area, you might want to consider that as a possibility. All right, let's move to the next bullet. And you'll see in the next bullet, I suggest to you that if indeed you are going to apply to those highly selective institutions, they're probably going to want you to file another document. That document is called the CSS profile. And that particular document will ask for a lot more information than what is asked for on FAFSA. So ultimately, if you've used your net price calculators, you've looked at those highly selectives, you think they might be affordable, follow through with the filing of that document as well. When you file the FAFSA this year for the first time, you're going to be able to list up to 20 different colleges or universities. This goes hand in hand with everything that I've talked about in relationship to the planning phase. More than ever, it's important that you as a family help your son or daughter identify multiple colleges. 5, 7, 10, 12 schools that that student might apply to. Because ultimately, what you want to do is come away with options. When you get to looking at your out-of-pocket cost, you want to be able to have enough options on that kitchen table so that you can make some prudent decisions. If you find out that you've been notified after you file that you are subject to verification, please don't panic. You haven't done anything wrong. The federal government wants colleges to verify that families have been filing the document correctly. And so they randomly select FAFSA filers. Randomly select. Not because you did anything wrong in filing. So if indeed the college is following up, indicating you're subject to verification, supply them with any information they request. It's simply a part of the process. So what's going to happen after you file, after the student applies and gets accepted, is you're going to get your official financial aid award. This financial aid award could very well include the merit side, the loan, the student loan, potentially campus employment, and the possibility for other need-based resources. A more comprehensive look at what we will call column 3, your out-of-pocket cost. But now we have new variables. Now we have variables that may cause you to appeal that information. Column 4, what institutions will be willing to work with you? Because now you're going to disclose to them there's more information they need to know about your family. What are those pieces of information they may need to know? For example, in the past, if you had more than one child attending college at the same time, that could be a benefit to you in the calculation. They've eliminated that question. So ultimately now you have to share that information with the college directly. All right, you're seeing our student aid index, college, university, but no, we have another child and we're paying X amount of money at a university for that school. Or we're going to have two going out in college at the same time. We have 3 children in college. Point of the view is every family is going to be different, and those universities are going to need to know that, but they're not going to learn that as you file the FAFSA any longer. What about medical expenses? What if you have insurance costs you're paying out of pocket? What if you have out-of-pocket costs yourselves, deductibles? Those particular costs are not recorded in FAFSA. Those colleges may want to learn about that. What if you have other children, a disabled child in your family that takes a lot of resources, or maybe you have other children that are at private high schools or private grade schools. There are educational costs involved in other family members, parents going to college that are costing you, you paying your own student loans back, all of these variables that are outside of the questions asked on FAFSA. And there may be other circumstances, losses of income. You know, future income is not as significant as past income. There are many variables that are outside FAFSA, and those variables are explained to each university through an appeal process. Some colleges will have forms on their websites for appeals. In some circumstances, they'll ask you to send in appeal letters. And in some circumstances, it'll simply start with a conversation with an admissions person. Remember I talked about the value of the relationship with that admissions person? That you need to have that person be a mentor, a helper, someone that assists you in the process. Make sure you work with that admissions person so that you can get all of that information clarified and they can move you through the appeal cycle. All right. Ultimately, you're going to go ahead and look at your column 3, look at your column 4 once you get to column 4. And then you're going to then decide, is it worth it? Is there any value in having a conversation with our number 1 choice school when it is indeed not the most affordable? You've done all of the work. You've gotten to column 4, but college A is the number 1 choice. And yet you know B's affordable and C's affordable and D's affordable, but A's the number 1 choice, and it seems to be beyond your affordability. Why not have an honest conversation with college A? Show them that you're not just taking a number out of the blue, but you're really looking at tax credits and cash flow and available savings and reasonable borrowing. How did you get to that figure? Show them how you got to it. Show them the other institutions that are affordable to you. Indicate to them that your son or daughter still would like to go to their institution. See if they're willing to work with you. Some will, some won't. You only will find out if you go through that process. You're going to make your final college choice. That final college choice needs to be done by May 1st of senior year. Now, it may end up, once you make that determination, that you, as a parent, will have to borrow money. There are a number of different ways that you should explore the idea of parent borrowing. There is a federal program called the Parent Loan to Undergraduate Students. Colleges can help you with the access to that particular program. But I have a handout in the list of handouts that are available to you through all of these particular seminars. There's a whole series of handouts. One of the handouts is on college borrowing. And before you make that determination, whether you do it yourself or you work with your financial advisor, you may assess and determine what is indeed the best method in your family to borrow money to pay for college. I'm going to encourage your son or daughter to hunt for campus employment. Obviously, it's a good idea to do that as early as possible, sometimes through even summer orientation programs. They can begin to learn about jobs available. Normally, it's the student that takes the online loan class because they're going to be signing the promissory note. They're going to be the one that's going to be committed to the repayment program after graduation. So you want students to understand what their commitment's going to be. And then potentially you'll have a conversation with the college of your choice to develop the payment program. But ultimately, from the beginning to the end, that's how the program works, to conquer your college choice so that your son or daughter can find the right institution and you can do it without excessive borrowing. Now, what I'd like to do is to have you go to our last video on some institutions, colleges, universities that literally are partnering with us and giving us the opportunity to do this presentation to you. So a big thank you to the University of Tampa in Tampa, Florida, to St. Xavier in Chicago, Illinois, to Bradley University in Peoria, and to St. Ambrose in Davenport, Iowa. Please spend some time on those particular videos. And if you have any opportunity to share these links to your friends, please do this. My goal is to get good information out to as many families as possible so that we can conquer our college costs.
Hello, everyone. I'm hoping that we're all together now after you've had an opportunity to watch these videos. I am Frank Palmasani, and Gilda Ross, who coordinated the program, is going to help us tonight. If you'd be kind enough to put questions in the chat, we're going to have an opportunity to have a panel of people answer those questions. I have some college representatives with me tonight. Jill Halubetz from St. Ambrose University is here. Sarah Doherty from Bradley University is here. And I see there is a picture, or there's another college rep in attendance, but I haven't seen who that might be. So maybe
that's Jasmine, also from St. Ambrose. Just kind of
very
learning.
good. Okay. Okay, so we have another person that's been watching from St. Ambrose. Great. So, but Jill and Sarah and I will be involved in doing the Q&A portion and answering any questions. Gilda will be able to receive those questions in the chat and then go from there. Just a couple of key points. Now, obviously, you just watched the video, and I hope that the way we did it, by segmenting it, it'll give you an opportunity at any point in time to go back. Gilda was kind enough to give you an opportunity to know where those links are, to go back and watch any portions that you need to review. And then, of course, the handouts are a permanent resource for you. But you'll notice it was all done in this big picture. Understand all of the different ways the sticker price can be reduced. That's important. Get an understanding of the planning phase, assessing your personal affordability, matching it up with what appears to be the net price, the estimates of what your actual costs will be, trying to find those financial fits. Understand how to do it by looking at the college categories, and then going through the execution phase by actually filing the document. Now, one of the things about FAFSA simplification, and I know you picked this up from the video, is they've really tweaked it. They've reduced the questions. They've eliminated some important questions, like the number of people in the family and college at the same time, which can be a hindrance. But they've really massaged the impact of income and assets. I hope you picked that up from the video. They've lessened the impact of income. Now, not lessened it significantly, but lessened it slightly by increasing what they call the expense allowance. But they literally have taken away the concept of an asset protection allowance. So the positioning of savings and investments may be more important. One of the things they also took away, which is a good thing for families, is you no longer have to report the amount of money you contributed in a given year to a program at work, like a 401k or a 403b. All they're looking for now is that adjusted gross income figure from the tax return. And there is going to be a way, when you'll see this new document, where you'll be able to do a transfer of the completed tax return So when you're filing in December of 2023, you're taking your, this is for parents of seniors, you're taking your 2022 tax return, and you're going to electronically, you're going to be able to have that go right into the document itself, into the FAFSA document. They've always had that capacity. Now they've fine-tuned it. So that they're looking at that adjusted gross income. And if it can't be done that way, you can always just record it. But the point being is that they've changed the impact of that income, taken out that untaxed income variable, but then they've created this higher expectation out of assets. So that's a variable that you might want to be aware of, and we can talk about that if you have questions. All right, and I think the concept of appeals, the what I'm now calling column 4, we're going to really get an opportunity for Jill and Sarah to talk about that, how they do that in their institutions when we get into the Q&A. But I'm going to go ahead and open it up at this point. And if anybody has questions, they've already indicated in the chat, Gilda can start with those. And as we start this discussion, more questions will emerge. Now, I do want to make a point too. Please, somebody ask me about what they're doing with divorced families. Maybe you could just type that out if it is specific to you, because that's another change that we definitely want to go over. I don't want that to get past us tonight, because that's they're doing it differently than they've done in the past. All right, Gilda, do we have any questions yet?
Well, I've got some questions.
Great.
So, and I'd like to ask the 3 of you that are here, or 4 of you, what do you think, and you might have, this I know bears repeating, what is the biggest mistake families make?
Sarah, let's start with you. What's your impression on that? Mistake
Yeah.
families might make in the process.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. I would say not giving schools a chance to show you how affordable we can be. Frank kind of mentioned that, but hang with us. Let us see what your family's going through, what other talents your student has, and be able to offer more on that award package and make this a better fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah. Jill, how about any thoughts that you might have?
Yes, I concur with Sarah for sure. But also, and I was just having this conversation with a parent today about should we file, should we not file, especially with the changes. If you've had students go through this process before, we don't know what that's going to look like quite yet. So basing the assumption of I'm not going to file because of my previous student, I don't know. We don't know what that will look like this year. But also filing the FAFSA so we have that information. In the end, your student may or may not be eligible for need-based aid. If not, they'll be eligible for the federal student loan. And in the end, you can decide whether you accept or decline that. But if something changes financially throughout the course of the year with your family, if we have that all it's going to take is all it will take is a few additional documents, as opposed to having to go through the whole FAFSA process at that point. So a number of reasons why you should file, whether or not you think you'll be eligible for need-based aid or not.
And my takeaway in relationship to the biggest mistake, Gilda, is that in the years that I've been working with families, one of the major flaws that so many families go through is they look at this as a kind of a twofold process. Let's allow the student to choose the college, and then let's hunt for money after that choice is made. In my judgment, all of this has to be intertwined. That's why we use that diagram of combining academic, field, and financial together. And what has happened is there's just this inclination. It makes more and more sense to me that students apply to multiple colleges. It's interesting, on the FAFSA document for years, they allowed families to list up to 10 institutions. They've increased that now to 20. And so there's so much opportunity here for you to get that information out to so many different schools, allowing yourself to get the responses and then make your comparisons. Because it's obvious to me that if I limit myself to 1, 2, or 3 schools, I may find none that are feasible financially, and then make this mistake of excessive borrowing. But if I expand that and I look at schools in different categories and the student is applying, I'm going to get those award letters and be able to make so much better judgments. That doesn't mean that you're telling your son or daughter they can't go here or they can't go here in the early phases. Get them to apply to different places, and then, kind of work with them to understand the big picture mix in the end. So that would be my thought on mistakes that often get made.
Okay, we're going to go to the specifics and question, but one more general one for the three of you. What is the question? Because I know you're all doing this multiple times in this fall season. What's the number one question that you get most often around financial aid?
Let's start with Jill.
I think the number one question I always get in the beginning is there more? Is there more? What are we missing? What have we not considered? And that is where, as Frank mentioned, that relationship with your admissions counselor, especially as we're kind of starting this cycle, we're getting to know kids. This is where that is so important, that you have to be willing and open to talking to your counselor. What have we not considered? Are there athletic interests that you have? Are you interested in fine arts, theater, choir, marching band? We have scholarships available for that, but maybe the student didn't indicate that on their application, or maybe they're kind of like, well, I might like to, how do I explore that a little bit more? Do we have all of your information? Is this the correct GPA? Things like that are important, especially when we get that question, is there more? We look at those things first, and that's where being open and sharing that information with your counselor is critical from the beginning, so that we can always be your advocate and we can go to bat for you, because we are the people that are going to do that.
Great.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jill. Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I get too. And that followed up by, when do we need to do all this? When do we need to decide? And, that will probably vary from school to school, but most of us have a May 1st deadline. So you'd have to make your decision to attend and accept that financial award by May 1st. But some schools like Bradley also have some special application scholarships that have an earlier deadline to apply for them. So, you may want to check with schools this time of year when you start your applications for admission, and also ask, do your special applications have any specific deadlines too, so you can stay on track for that as well.
I would want to point out to all families that we are this year going to have more of a timing crunch than we've had in the past, because, in the last few years, families could start that filing of the FAFSA in October. Now, because it's the new FAFSA simplification, the new form is not going to be out till December. So ideally, if you're doing it in October, you could have award letters in front of you in November, December, January, February, March. You have plenty of time to assess, review, analyze, go back and visit, have more conversations before that May 1 deadline. This year, it's going to be a little tighter for senior parents. So I would make sure you have your ducks in a row, so that on December 1, when that new FAFSA is out, you're ready to roll. Get it in if you possibly can, and then wait for the colleges to respond. Hopefully they'll get back to you in January with your awards, and then you can see if you're going to go through the appeal process from there.
If I can make a mention, Frank, just dovetailing off of that, one thing you could do now is to create your FSA ID, so that that login information is ready to go, because you can no longer create that as part of filing the FAFSA. That has to be created prior to you filing the FAFSA. So that is something that easily you could take care of at this point. And high school counselors, anybody at your student school can likely help with that process of creating the FSA ID, or maybe having sessions on creating that.
And a point that Jill is making, families, is the FAFSA ID is the way you sign the document. So a parent is signing the document and a student is signing the document. And you're signing the document with these ID numbers. And so having those in advance is obviously very, very smart.
Mhm. Good. How early can students start applying for scholarships? Are there some available to high school freshmen?
So when we talk about, here's my general piece of advice to families. In the first semester of senior year, your focus is the colleges that the student is most interested in, formulating that list, developing those opportunities, getting those applications out, and then working with those colleges on scholarship potential. In the second semester of senior year, once that's done, now you can focus your attention on independent organizations that offer scholarship. Remember, in the video I talked about the local, the regional, and the national. So you want to focus on those in that second semester. Seldom, but occasionally, there might be an opportunity for a student in high school prior to senior year to pursue independent scholarships. But it's more for just getting the information as to what they're going to be like. Very seldom will this underclassman student be able to apply actually for those independent organizations. Typically, that's a senior year endeavor.
Very good. Let's take that divorce question that you just referenced before. In this case, the father of the child is not in her life and rarely pays child support. What do we have to do for FAFSA with him? Will his income affect her?
So if it's a divorced family, and one of the things they've changed on this is that used to be separated and divorced was considered to be divorced. Now they're fine-tuning that a little bit and asking for living outside the home separated. You can't be living in the home separated. You have to be living outside the home separated. And normally there may even be a desire for some legal separation material. But the concept is that the student is in a divorce household. So if the student is getting their primary resources from the family they live with, which is usually the case, right? So my daughter lives with me more than 6 months during the last 12-month cycle. I have not remarried. Then the income and assets I'm recording are mine and my daughter's, right? I'm the primary person providing those resources, the income to that student, I'm filing. If I do remarry, it's still my entire household. So it's going to be the new spouse that's going to be the filing. The parent outside, the biological parent outside of that arrangement is not filing. So here was always the question in the past. Well, what if the child is living with the two sets of parents equally? Now who files? In the past, we were always able to say, well, you're choosing. And so doesn't it make sense that the family who has the lower income be the one filing? They're squeezing us on that because what they now are saying is the parent who provides the greater amount of financial support to that student, that's the household that should be the filing. The challenge that I have in this regulation is who's monitoring that. Who is going? I don't know how they're going to do that, but that's how the requirements are being presented to us. So be conscious of that, families, if you're in a divorce household.
Got it. Do students and parents need a FAFSA ID?
Yes, one parent does, and the student does.
Very good. Here's a question about finding independent scholarships. How best to find them?
If you remember from the video, I talked about this local, regional, national, local being the scholarships that are always available every year from the community directly at the high school. So that's where you work with your own high school counselors, making sure that you understand what system they're using. You might then move on to the regional ones. In other words, what's going on in your geographic area where you're checking not only your own high school, but the websites of the high schools throughout your region, maybe in DuPage County, for example, as parents in Glenbard would be. So, you could even Google what, college scholarships available to residents of DuPage County. those kinds of things, to be looking for those independent scholarship options. I don't like families spending a lot of time on these national scholarships because of the energy. It's so difficult. You're competing with everyone else in the country. So you have to prioritize this. This is the point I made. I'd be interested though in your experiences, Sarah and Jill. Are there independent scholarships that might be available in your geographic areas to students who are coming in and attending your institutions? Do you find any of that, or are most of the students that come to you receive independent scholarships because they were securing them when they were in high school? What's been your experience with that, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, for students in the Chicagoland area, they're finding their own. Bradley does have some scholarships for students in the Peoria area. So some of our local students have access to some additional outside scholarships. But for the students I work with in the Chicagoland area, they're finding their own. And we have some ideas listed on our website of where to look as well. So we try to make that process as easy as possible. We'll certainly accept any outside scholarships without adjusting what we're offering the students. So, we promote that just as much as you all do.
That's really an important point, Sarah. I'll follow up on that after Jill answers.
Oh, I would say the same. Being in Iowa as Illinois residents, most of our students are coming with local scholarships, regional scholarships from which they found through their high schools and their different platforms. So. Great.
All right. So the follow-up I wanted to mention, Sarah mentioned it, but I don't want to gloss over it. It's really important. If your son or daughter obtains independent scholarships at every institution that they encounter, that they apply to, that they're going to be working with, ask those institutions, how are you going to view this? Because there are a number, like Bradley, like St. Ambrose, a number of institutions that will not impact in a negative way anything else that's been offered. In other words, it becomes an add-on. It can be used to lower your out-of-pocket cost. It doesn't impact other awards. Some institutions it might. So you're going to want to have that question asked and answered.
If you make, so here's a family, they're getting specific here somewhat. If you make $150K but have no savings due to unplanned medical expenses that depleted it, how does that affect the parent obligation calculation? Is living at home and college or DuPage the only option?
Well, first off, I would say no, clearly it may not be the only option. It can be an option. But if we're talking about whatever that income is, so if there's not savings investments that are reportable, then the impact on the SAI is going to be just on that income, right? So the 150K may generate an SAI that's higher than Pell Grant eligibility, higher than MAP grant eligibility, but I would suspect it's not higher than the potential need-based money that can be offered at a number of institutions. So don't think, oh, I'm at a certain income level and I shouldn't file because of that. There may be need-based money from the schools themselves. And then you're wanting a window into direct loan. You can't have that window unless you file the document. And for many institutions, they can't get a job on campus unless they file the document. So those components are important, right? Need-based money at the school, the ability to work on campus, and certainly student loan money, all tied into filing. So back to Jill's point and Sarah's point, I don't ever think anyone should say, I just earned too much, I shouldn't file at all. I know some families will choose that, but I think it's still logical to do it. And again, if there's extenuating circumstances, it sounded like in that family's situation, there might have been. So we file the document, we get an index number that goes to the colleges, they create awards, but there might be elements of appeal. And so that obviously can be considered as well.
Good. This is a little bit broader. In this case, the child wants to be an art teacher. How do you narrow down colleges the fastest? with
Yeah,
this
so this is a
particular
little
degree.
different. This is not a really more of a money issue. It's really a high school counselor working with the student. There are a number of software programs out there today, wonderful software programs that high schools have, where the students go in and put a number of variables, including college major, interest areas, and then the list of all of the schools that would offer that would appear. So I don't know if the Glenbard schools are using Naviance. It's really they are. So that's probably the one
Something new this
program
year.
that's-
But thank you for mentioning that. The college counselor is going to be really, that's really good. They're going to, the high school counselor is really
are
going to be
gonna
your
really
go-to.
working on that topic. Yeah, and I would say, I would say to all families, you're in a transition when you are in this process of working on college, right? You've had your high school counselor, but as you're making your applications, you now have people like Sarah and Jill around. So you also
Yeah.
have the admissions people at all of the colleges, and they're kind of filling in as well in this process. And so use them as a resource. As you're having your conversations at college fairs, tell me about your art program, what's involved in it.
Right.
And I think that they'll be great in that area.
So here's my last question for you. And you've been so generous with your time. I can't thank you enough. The three of you, you are in an elevator, and now that person next to you has found out what it is that you do. During the course of that elevator ride, what do you want them to know about what you do? And what's the best piece of information for them?
So you're asking us what we're each doing professionally. Is that what you're saying? Is that the question, Gilda?
Well, I'm in the elevator with you, Frank, and I just found out your expertise. And I want one piece of advice that's not going to take it. Maybe we're going to the 100th floor, but
Gotcha.
what is it?
I think I would go back to, if I was in that situation, Gilda, I would go back to don't fall into the trap as a parent of believing that you have to go through this experience and you're going to have to borrow whatever it takes, because everyone's doing that today. This is the reason why we have so many as students that have taken on excessive debt, and they're in situations where it blows up their life because they're repaying for so long. The Biden administration is working diligently on creating different ways of repayment. We haven't gotten into that. We certainly can if people want to talk about it. But the point is, even with that, you don't want to get into that mindset that, well, whatever it takes, we're just going to have to borrow whatever amount of money. If you go through this process, the process I've defined, I completely believe that families can find affordable options. And so that would be my piece of advice. Sarah, what do you think?
I would say something you touched on earlier is start that relationship with your admission counselor early, because we'll be your advocate through this whole process. So, it's harder when you wait until March or April to say, Sarah, we're really interested, but we need help making this affordable. If you start talking with me now, even if it's just an email saying, hey, I'm really interested in Bradley. I look forward to talking with you this year. So I know, then I've heard of you. I know what you're interested in. I can be ready to help you through the whole process. So I always recommend, people start out with everything now. And, I don't know, Frank, if you want to get into appeals, but a lot of us as admission counselors will be the ones that are representing you in the appeal process. And so the more we know you, the more comfortable we are with you and have had conversations with you, the better we can help you.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. Jill?
Yep, and I think kind of touching on what everybody has said, we are admissions counselors, and I like to emphasize the word counselors because I think the perception is, well, they're just trying to sell me on their school, and they just, they're going to tell me what I want to hear. Yes, we want every student that we interact with to come to St. Ambrose. Do we know that not every student I interact with will come to St. Ambrose or Bradley or wherever? Yes. A big part of our job and our responsibility with you, just like the art question, is to help you determine if St. Ambrose is going to be the best fit for you for our art program based upon all of these different things. And through those conversations, we can really help you assess that from a financial perspective, an academic perspective, a personal perspective, because not only do we want you to come there, we want you to stay, and we want you to graduate with a degree. So if there's any red flags that along the way, we might say, well, what are the chances of that happening based upon this concern or this piece of it? We truly are there to counsel you and your families as well. So don't shy away if we're calling you or emailing. We're doing it because we want to have that relationship with you and truly help you through this process.
Perfect. Great advice. And it's so kind of you to share this. Those of you that, and there's so many that are still with us tonight. Yes. And lots of applause. So grateful. You want to go to the Glenbard Parent Series website, look for Frank's page. That's where you'll find all the handouts and this recording. Also, another option is go to the Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel where you can find all of our past programs. Thank you, everybody. Yes, thank you. This has been very informative. You're so generous with your time and your expertise. I'm so grateful to you all.
Could I make a closing comment?
Please,
Again,
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, like thank Gilda, thank the parent program, thanks Sarah and Jill, but also for families. I am a retired educator, so it's been 48 years of education. I just retired this past year, which gives me a little bit more time. So I'm going to give you my email. It is Palmasani, my last name, PALMASANI @gmail.com. Questions, email me. Individual work, families want to work with somebody individually on the combining the financial issues with these. I'm more available now than I ever have been. And so this is another component that you might want to engage in. That's totally up to you. And certainly, as Gilda has mentioned in the early phase, share this on social media, the videos with anyone that you like. The more we get the word out, hopefully, the more people we can help.
Definitely. Thank you. You are generous with an exclamation point, Frank. Thank you. This is where we go. This is where we hug the kids, Frank. So we're going to go hug the kids. Have a great evening, everybody. See you next time. Thank you.
Take care.